This is probably one of the best multi-class characters you can make. It is a multi, if not a triple multi-class, depending on the path you take, that is going to facilitate all the utility in combat you may need to keep your team alive and protected while being able to blast enemies into next week, while also still providing incredible utility perhaps out of combat, depending on how your team setup is. We'll go through it, talk about your options, talk a little bit about the mandatory things, as well as going over some of the gear. We'll do that first before we dive into the actual leveling. So we'll start with that. This is Shadowheart, my Shadowheart character. You may recognize her, although she may have lost some legs. I'm not sure exactly what's going on there, but this is the character that I currently use as the primary support unit. In terms of armor, we have basic saving throws, Cloak of the Weave, which is more spell save DC and attack rolls, but also being able to defend herself, which also is the reason why we have the adamantine splint armor, as we have access to heavy armor on this particular multi-class. Makes her very safe. She's very tanky, very survivable. Speaking of survivable, gloves of missile snaring, very useful because she's typically in the back, which means the only thing that's going to get to her are ranged attacks. I, however, would recommend the gloves you can get from, I believe his name is Zevlor, the leader of the Tieflings in Act 1. It's a very nice healing support item. Unfortunately, due to my playthrough being perhaps a little different, I lost out on that opportunity, but hopefully you have the items. Bone Spike Boots is simply utility and more saving throws. Being able to keep up your concentration spells is really, really nice. In terms of jewelry, we have a basic healing jewelry to prevent spell slot usage and still being able to get those healing benefits. Speaking of healing benefits, we have one ring that increases our healing, which is very, very nice. And then also just a unique ring that is, or a utility ring that's going to give us a little bit of skill checks because I needed an Arcana and a Religion character. But you can maybe find something better. I have, however, not found anything more useful yet. But the big two pieces, the shield, Ketheric shield is probably one of my favorites here. Spell save DC goes up as well as dexterity saving throws. This way I'm also kind of inoculated against wayward fireballs. You could, however, use something like Shield of Devotion for another spell slot and a Shield of Devotion 8 spell. I didn't think that was necessary, but perhaps you are even more wild with your spells. On top of that, I like to use the Markoshikir. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. It comes from the Mage Tower in Act 3. It allows you to get another layer of defense that based on which element you choose, as well as some very powerful spell casting, which is really, really useful, which allows you to not use your dedicated spell slots or even your dedicated saved spells or your prepared spells to just nuke enemies down, because sometimes the best way to support your team is to kill the enemy slightly quicker. It also gives you the Arcane Battery, which of course is very, very lovely, and additional spell save and DC and attack rolls and all that good stuff. You could also, however, use, if you want to go even harder on the supporting aspect, Staff of the Arcane Blessing. I believe you get this in Act 1. It's incredible. This is the staff I used pretty much through the entirety of the game until the rest of my team was pretty competent by themselves and I wasn't really missing anything. This is by far one of the most broken support spells. Just making your Bless spell, which is already one of the best support spells to begin with, even better. I'm still using Bless in long fights, and this is just an incredible piece. You could also use something like the Blood of Lathander, which is really, really nice. Gives her a Death Defy, gives her also the benefit of Lathander's Light, but since she typically now is more in the back than the front, I didn't feel like Lathander's Light was really getting all that much value, although the Sunbeam is one hell of a cast. It's incredible. Anyway, these are some of my gear suggestions. By no means is this set in stone. Essentially, I try to keep her alive and make sure her concentration checks are solid. And on top of that, I just find out what allows me to get better healing, better support, and of course, the occasional nuke in. This is what I'm using, but I also oftentimes switch things out in case of emergency or if the situation requires it. It's up to you. Let's go to the leveling. So starting at level 1, the only thing that is the most important decision you have to make is make sure you start off as a cleric. That's it. Specifically, a life cleric. The reason for that is because we want to have the heavy armor proficiency. Not all Cleric domains get that. For example, the Light domain, which is kind of like your pseudo Wizard Cleric, they don't get it. And we want that Life domain, not only because it also gives us Disciple of Life, which increases our healing done for each healing spell based on the spell's level +2, but we get the Heavy Armor as well, and we get 2 really useful spells. Cure Wounds, which had a bug, and I will soon be seeing if that bug still exists, but also the best spell for support in the game, in my opinion, or at least one of them, which is Bless, which of course we can also empower further with that staff I showed you prior to this. So make sure you have those sorted. In terms of cantrips, you could go with Sacred Flame, because we are going to be using Charisma as our primary stat. I don't think it is wise to use an offensive cantrip here. Use Utility. If it's your face of the party, use Thaumaturgy. Otherwise, just simply use Light. I would say Guidance is mandatory and Resistance is optional. If you just want to have something to spam in level 1, Sacred Flame is always useful. But I know I didn't need that, so I'm just going to go with Resistance just to have it, even though it's not really necessary. On top of that, in terms of abilities, we are going to pump Charisma. We're going to have a little bit of Wisdom. Let's get rid of all the things we don't need. We don't need Strength. We don't need Dexterity. After all, we're wearing Heavy Armor. Constitution is fairly important because dead clerics don't heal. Intelligence is irrelevant because we just simply don't care. And on top of that, Charisma is mandatory. So as you can see, we have 2 uneven for the first stat attribute feat. And then, of course, a nice rounded 16 Constitution to make sure that we don't die in the early stages. However, if you feel this is uncomfortable or you don't like minus points, that's okay. You can drop some Wisdom. Maybe you can end up getting some more Dexterity, maybe some more Intelligence. You can do that. It doesn't matter. I would, however, recommend not changing the Constitution and Charisma. Beyond that, it's entirely up to you. I just like Wisdom because it gives me better perception, which is really, really nice. But also it gives me access to be, or at least not access, but it gives me some inoculation against some of the crowd control effects that I was struggling against. And that can make you lose turns and such. And if your healer loses a turn, well, that could be kind of problematic, as one might imagine. But as long as Constitution and Charisma are the 2 highest, you are good to go. And that is pretty much level 1. Proficiencies are pretty much locked in since this is not our main character that we are going to talk with. However, if it was, I would recommend taking History into Persuasion. But since it isn't, I won't. And it's pretty much set in stone for me. So let's go to level 2. So at level 2, things will start to make a bit more sense, especially with the high Charisma and, of course, the decisions we have made so far, which aren't many, so you should be able to keep up. In terms of the class, we are directly going to multi-class into Bard. Because Bard is the quintessential support character. It's going to give us access to something called Bardic Inspiration, which is going to be phenomenal and simply uses a bonus action, so we could do a full heal and then also still support, which is incredible. We're going to get access to actual useful cantrips that are using our Charisma modifier, including Vicious Mockery, which not only does psychic damage, which is one of the more rarer damage types and rarely resisted, but it also gives a disadvantage on the attack roll to the enemy that you hit with it if they fail their save, which is very, very good. Now, on top of that, it's entirely up to you. If you haven't picked up Light, pick up Light. You could also pick up Mage Hand if you want some utility. Or if you are the face of the character or face of the party, you can use Friends. Or be wary, there might be some problems if you do too much on higher difficulties. A Minor Illusion can be clutch if you are sneaky about it. I prefer just a good old Mage Hand and call it a day. In terms of spells, now as you can see, it says we already have access to Healing Word here, and it also says that we have access to Cure Wounds. The problem is, they are accessed through our Cleric School. The problem with that is, Cleric School does Wisdom-based spellcasting, and we want to make sure that we have access to the Charisma-based spellcasting. So, we are going to pick up Healing Word here, so that we have the Charisma-based version. We're also going to pick up the Cure Wounds here, so we have a Charisma-based version. As it also says in yellow, you will have access to both. And on top of that, we are going to be using, I would recommend Longstrider. You can cast this as a ritual, which means it doesn't require a spell slot at the beginning of a day, doesn't require concentration, and your entire team gets 3 meters of extra movement. It is broken. Take that. We are not picking up Bane because I prefer Bless, and we have that from our Wizard class. And you can pick up Speak with Animals if you are more of the dialogue character at this part of the game. But I would highly recommend either Fairy Fire in terms of support spells, or maybe even Featherfall if you're looking for utility. Now, don't worry, you can change these spells quite usefully out of combat. Just know you have them access, but in case you are getting ready for combat, I would recommend Fairy Fire, and make sure you have Healing Word and Cure Wounds. Starting instrument, it's entirely up to you. I like the violin. Out of all these, there's no specific reason as to why you should take one or the other. Just pick your favorite. And in terms of abilities, we get access to another skill because we multi-classed. Now, we are not the talking character, but maybe you are, so maybe you want to pick up the deception. It's entirely up to you. I, however, am going to go with something useful out of combat that I need to make sure that I succeed. That's perception for me. Perception allows me to see the traps, allows me to see secrets in case my Asterion failed his perception checks. It's just really nice. I would recommend that, but it's entirely up to you. Maybe you like investigation or nature, or maybe you just want to know more about magic. Who knows? It's entirely up to you. It's not going to matter too much at this stage of the game. At level 3, you can make another decision here. You can directly go into the third multi-class, which would be Sorcerer. However, I would recommend against that right now because we desperately need additional levels in Bard for spell slot progression and supportive utility. So we're going to stick with Bard right now. It's going to give us access to Jacks of all trades, which is going to make us kind of a skill monkey. Very, very useful. Which is the utility out of combat. More spell slots, but also Song of Rest. You and your allies are revitalized as though you would have taken a short rest, which is better than the healing ability you get from Cleric, Life Cleric 2, which is very, very nice. So an extra short rest without having to take a short rest in terms of healing. Very good. We also get the ability to replace a spell if we would want to. So maybe you didn't like Fairy Fire, you can switch to Featherfall, but we also get another spell. And at this point, I would take the one you had not taken yet. In this case, I am going to take Featherfall, but perhaps you would prefer Sleep, or maybe you want to pick up a concentration spell already. But once again, we have Bless, and I find it very difficult to use Heroism over Bless. So it's entirely up to you, but I would strongly recommend just getting Featherfall, because if you play around this game too much, you know that there are some particular obstacles that may require the overcoming of gravity. So I like Featherfall, but ultimately up to you. Perhaps you have different means of solving gravity. So we're going to go to level 4. Bard level 3. Now we get the subclass. And we get some wonderful features as well. In terms of spells, it's entirely up to you. We do get access to second level spells. There are some really clutch, very clutch spells here. With Cloud of Daggers is an incredibly powerful offensive spell. So if you lack magical damage and AoE damage, Cloud of Dagger is definitely one worth picking up. You could also use Enhance Ability, which allows you to do better checks, in addition to guidance. But make sure you remember that if you want a guidance with this particular character, you can't also enhance the ability. You have to choose, and it would require a spell slot, so be wary of that. On top of that, Heat Metal can be used for some incredible funny damage effects. Shatter is pretty good. Silence is an incredible supportive character. If you find yourself having a lot of issues with magical casters, throw a Silence in there. Just be wary, it is concentration. Lesser Restoration is really useful because it is a supportive spell and can cure a bunch of stuff, including things that may or may not be required out of combat. I'll let you find that out on your own. But I would recommend right now as it stands, if you want utility against magic, take Silence. If you just want generic utility, a utility spell, take Lesser Restoration. Otherwise, take Cloud of Daggers if you want some damage. It's entirely up to you. Subclass College of Lore is indeed the way we're going to go. College of Swords and College of Valor are more melee-based shenanigans. So College of Swords is definitely out. College of Valor does have perhaps some useful benefits with combat inspiration, but College of Lore allows us to use cutting words, which is very good because we can debuff enemies with that, but also we get access to later features which allow us to get unique spells or from other spell classes more often than the other subclasses can. So be wary of that. Once again, if you don't like the spells, you can change them. They are very kind like that. It is entirely up to you. In terms of skills, we do get some expertise now as well. It's entirely up to you which one you take. I typically just take perception. And since I'm not the dialogue character, insight is not as important. But perhaps you want to know more about religion. After all, you started off as a cleric. Perhaps it's time you pick some tomes up and start reading some history. You know, it's important to know where you came from. But also medicine remains a really good option. On top of that, you get access to 3 of these particular skills here. I typically go with the utility ones because I'm not the character that talks. Let's pick up survival. Let's pick up a investigation. And mind you, if you take proficiency, you can also immediately spec into the expertise if you want to. And I'm taking some nature here, just simply because I know there's a couple of checks in the game that I would otherwise miss out on if I happen to fail them. So, entirely up to you, depending on your team makeup. Because who knows, maybe you already have a hunter dedicated to nature and survival and animal handling, right? You would take entirely different skills here. It's entirely up to you. I've decided to go with the offensive spell. Cutting words is great. I'm not replacing any spells, so we go directly to level 5, which gives us Bard level 4. Another big level for us because we get a feat. And this is one of the reasons we didn't want to multi-class already. In terms of cantrips, we get another one. So if you missed out on one, you can take the other one here. Let's take Friends. Who knows? You might need it. In terms of spells, take the spell you wanted to take but couldn't take just yet. I like, let's see, Calm Emotions is useful. Detect Thoughts is very useful if you are the dialogue character. Let's actually, yeah, they're so good. I'm going to take Lesser Restoration because I don't have that yet. And another way to silence people is to kill them. So there is that. In terms of feat, though, ability improvement, we're going to maximize our charisma right here. To, or at least maximize it. We're going to give ourselves the 18 and the 16 from wisdom because we're not expecting everybody to have Auntie Ethel or know exactly all the other ability increases in the game. But if you do find them and you do use them, you can always respec and optimize your stats better. As long as you keep your constitution high, because dead people don't do anything, and your primary casting modifier, which for this build is charisma, maxed out. From that point forward, it's entirely up to you. Now, once again, we are level 6 character, level 5 bard. Incredible stuff coming our way. Improved bardic inspiration. That D6 becomes a D8. Better debuffs, better inspirations. We also have font inspiration, because normally they only happen to come back on a long rest, but now they come back on a short rest, which is going to be incredibly more powerful because we can use not twice as much, but 3 times as much effectively, which allows you to be much, much more generous with that bardic inspiration and the potential debuffs that use bardic inspiration. In terms of spells, we also get access to our 3rd level spells. There's a couple of good ones. Fear could be useful for CC. Feign Death I never found really useful. Warding is too slow. Hypnotic Pattern is phenomenal. They cannot attack you, which is a very good debuff to have on the enemy if you are trying to not be attacked. Speak with Death if you don't have any other means. There are other means in the game to achieve this, but otherwise, get it right now. You can drop it later. I typically actually go with something like a Silence. I don't actually find the tier 3 spells all that useful, with the exception of maybe some plant growth mechanics if I had more of a ranged type party, but I have mostly a melee type party, which means plant growth is a problem for me if I were to use it, but perhaps your composition is different. An Hypnotic Pattern is great, but you know what's even better than hypnotizing a creature? It's killing a creature. So I'm going to go with Silence. That's even better as well. This means I can keep those mages at bay or make them not nuke me as hard, or even force them, if you know how the AI works, into a position where I can kill them. much more efficiently than anything else. Once again, you can replace spells. Spell decision is ultimately up to you. I'm just picking based on my personal preference, play style, and of course, composition. Level 7, we get Counter Charm, which is pretty interesting if you have a character with you on the back line, or if you, for some reason, find yourself more often on the front line. It's fairly useful if you want to use this action against very specific situations. On top of that, you can pick up additional spells. Maybe you want to pick up the Hypnotic Pattern after roll. Magical Secrets is where the magic happens. This is one of the feats that we get at Bard 6 that allows us to essentially pick a spell from all the other spellcasters. This is really, really nice. Now, have your pick. Sleet Storm is phenomenal damage. You can also perhaps use Hunger of Hadar, but that's a little touch and go because it may also backfire. Haste is a must-have. Haste is incredibly broken because it allows you to get a full action, which is incredibly, incredibly strong. Much stronger than the tabletop version. Warden of Vitality is also really, really good because it allows you as a bonus action to heal yourself or nearby allies, which is very, very good. You can also maybe pick up some Animate Dead action if you want to have some friends with you. Counterspell is a good option for support. If you want to nuke, Fireball remains phenomenal. Grand Flight can be incredibly useful. You have so many incredible options here. Spike Growth is great. Scorching Ray is awesome. It is very difficult, if I'm being honest with you, to choose any kind of spell here because they're all good. You can even take some cantrips, which then allow you to take, for example, Eldritch Blast, which is one of the best cantrips in the game, and then actually be able to use your charisma modifier for it as well, because this is a warlock spell, which otherwise you would not be able to do. But we also have Vicious Mockery, which we, as a support character, would prefer to use. Darkness is incredible. It's also good. I would recommend getting Haste if you don't like spamming Bless all the time. Haste is ridiculously strong. And on top of that, maybe a counter spell is really, really good. Or maybe take Revivify if you want to make sure you can revive your characters because you don't have Scrolls of Resurrection anymore. Or if you just want to nuke, go Fireball. So if you want to be a healer, go Revivify. If you want to nuke, Fireball. If you want to be clever about it, take Counterspell. I like Counterspell because being able to take out a spell that's going to ruin your day is going to be far more useful at the right time than making sure that you have to revive them after you did not stop their spell from going through. It's preventive versus curative, I guess is the way to look at it. It's entirely up to you, my point. It's like, this is probably the most difficult decision you're going to have to make in this character because there's just so much, like even Hellish Rebuke is here. It's to a spiritual weapon. If they bloody fix that finally, it's going to be good. It looks like it's fixed. So it's going to be really, really nice to run that as well as a cleric. But we can get that later as well. A lot of value to be had from that. Sorry, I got a little stun lock there again, even though when I'm trying to explain what I did, it's just so much value there. Speaking of more value though, make sure that you pick up another spell of choice. We do get access to 4th level spells. Greater invisibility, freedom of movement can be clutch. Dimension Door is always lovely. Confusion, I didn't have so much luck with it. Polymorph can be very, very funny. Just pick your favorite spell. Let's go with something I haven't had yet, but I know I might need. Where is it? Blindness is also pretty good. Shatter, no. Heat Metal. Hold Person is one of the spells I typically want to inoculate myself against, because if you stun them, you can see that last line there. Attacks from within 3 meters are always critical hits. If I stun somebody, I have 2 heavy and 2 powerful melee units. They are going to start critting like mad. It's a lot of damage. It's very powerful. But it's up to you. Maybe you prefer to not be seen as opposed to making sure that they don't move. It's up to you. Spell choice is by far always going to be one of the most difficult decisions you have to make. And it's highly personal. Give or take the mandatory ones. Well, more spells. Let's see. I just take a... every single time. I'm going to go with Enhance Ability because the dialogue options. because there are items in the game that are going to give you access to guidance. There's a necklace that gives you guidance. I've given that to my rogue, for example. So if he's out of the team, he can still guidance himself with those sleight of hand checks. Very, very useful. So getting that particular spell with you is pretty good. You could go for a multitude of interesting features here. Maybe tough. Warcaster is really, really good. This allows you to keep concentration and also the occasional shocking grasp. If you're looking for a feat as opposed to an ability improvement, I would recommend that. This is the one I took. However, if you think this is too fussy or you're thinking your concentration is good enough anyway, you can also simply go with an ability improvement and pushing your charisma to 20. But there are items that allow you to get more charisma, and there's also items that allow you to get more concentration or better concentration rolls, so it's entirely up to you. But if you want the no-brainer, go with charisma, go from there. Very, very simplistic, very solid, because it kind of increases the entirety of your character, right? Now, we get the character level 10. We're almost at the end. We get more spells. We now have access to spells of level 5. Mass Cure Wounds is phenomenal. We are the healer, of course. Greater Restoration is really good as well. Getting rid of Petrification, Stun, or Charm can be very useful in and out of combat. There's a couple of situations you perhaps would want to have it. You can also do Dominate Person, which is ridiculously good. But I have made this my support character, so I want to make sure I can heal. But if you prefer to prevent the enemy from doing damage by making sure they do damage themselves, you can do that as well. It's entirely up your alignment chart, I suppose, is the best way of putting that. Change the spells you want to change. Go to level 11. All right. Here's another magical secret. As lore bards, we get 2 times the magical secrets compared to the other parts. We also get an additional cantrip. Pick your favorite. Let's take Dancing Lights. In top of another spell, let's take Greater Restoration. After all, she is my healer. Magical secrets. We also get access to the 5 versions, level 5 magical secret spells. Access to Banishment, Wall of Stone, Contagion. Conjure Elemental is broken, by the way. So if you want another unit on your team that's incredibly powerful, take Conjure Elemental. That's my strong recommendation, if I'm being perfectly honest with you. Doesn't require concentration. You just set it and forget it, and you have an extra unit on your team. On top of that, maybe pick up a Revivify, a Mass Healing Words. You can also pick up your Warden of Vitality if you want to have other friends helping you out. Perhaps this is more your alignment, if you will. Wall of Fire can be very clutch. Death Ward if you want to make sure that if you fail, you don't actually fail. It's entirely up to you. Guardian of Faith, I have had some hits and wins and loses with. I'm not really a big fan of it. Ice Storm is really, really good for nuking. But once again, this is our supportive character, so it's kind of up to you on what you want to do here. Do you need more damage? Do you need more support? Do you need flight? Utility? Who knows? Replace the spells you want to replace, and make sure that you don't forget to set your skills, because you keep getting skills, because bards are very skill nice in that sense. Let's grab ourselves some investigation, just to make sure that we have that nice and high. We actually get 2 options. Let's do religion. We are the cleric-ish, after all. It's entirely up to you. Once again, like, it depends on how you have set the rest of the skills up in your team, based on what you may or may not need. And now we have the final level. Now you have to make a decision. You can go for another spell and get access to level 6 spells. They are very good. Otto's Irresistible Dance, phenomenal. Eye Bite, incredible. Right? There's a lot of power in that. However, I found that the power wasn't really enough for me. The Dancer has disadvantage on attack rolls and dexterity saving throws. Okay, so does Death, right? Eye Bite. While concentrating, you may cast Eye Bite without expending a spell slot, which is really, really good, of course, but it does require concentration, which means you can't use Haste, which is broken, or even Bless, or an improved Bless with the staff, which is also broken. So I kind of decided to look around and go for something entirely different. I've added another class. Sorcerer, which may seem a little weird to you, but hold on. Not only do we get Sorcerer shenanigans, which is all charisma based, and we are primary charisma. As you look at the right, 20 charisma. So you get to choose Firebolt. So you get another fire. This is also one of the reasons you can maybe choose charisma or sorcerer early, because of the high charisma. And that way you can maybe take Bone Chill, do a bunch of necrotic damage, because these cantrips, they scale based on level of the character. So take Fireball, Bone Chill, Acid Splash. All of these are really, really good. Ray of Frost is a really nice one to have because it also reduces enemy movement, which means support, right? Utility. Shocking Grasp remains really, really nice. If they are in melee range, you can Shocking Grasp them, and if they hit, you can just walk away without using the disengage action, which is very, very comfy. So that's what I would recommend. Ray of Frost, Shocking Grasp, Bone Chill for utility, and then whatever you want right here. Maybe a Poison Spray. Maybe you want to do some damage. Entirely up to you. It's very, very good. I actually took Sorcerer on my original playthrough a little earlier because I wanted a little bit more utility in terms of these spells. Because we get access to not only one of the best defensive spells, Shield. As a reaction, we can increase our armor class by 5 if we get hit, plus we can protect ourselves against Magic Missile. Of course, this facilitates more damage being negated or avoided altogether. You can also take Magic Missile, which is a guaranteed damage hit, but you can also pick up something else. It doesn't really matter. Maybe some Fog Clouds, maybe Chromatic Orb. It's entirely... Burning Hand's pretty good. Witch Bolt has its uses. Ice Knife, real surprisingly solid. I went with Magic Missile just to have those guarantee hits. There's a couple of enemies that are very low life or just need a single hit that are left because they are almost dead. And this allows you to guarantee the damage on them as long as you can target them, which is very, very good utility. In terms of subclass, well, Wild Magic is a dangerous hazard, so don't go with that. Draconic Bloodline doesn't really do anything for us because, yes, it gives us much more hit points, which is nice, but it's only 1 for each sorcerer level. So it's going to get 1 hit point. I don't think that's going to be too nice. Plus, we already have heavy armor, so the armor class of 13 is not really going to fundamentally change anything about us. But we get some nice draconic scales in our face if we wanted to. However, Storm Sorcery gives us access to Tempestuous Magic. Every single time when we cast a spell of level 1 or higher, we can move as a bonus action away without triggering attack of opportunity. So if the enemy gets near us, we cast a spell and we fly away without triggering attack of opportunities. It's incredible. It is phenomenal. Which makes this character an incredible supportive character that can heal, bring you back, cure anything, nuke you into next week. And on top of that, you can also still change your cleric spells out for other supportive spells if you want to. You can change some of the cantrips. The decisions are ultimately endless, and if you don't like something, look at all the reactions you can make as well, which is insane. That's okay. You can just respec and change it as you see fit. But this is the way I did it. Make sure to check out the items as well, because that's had a large influence on my decisions ultimately. But thank you so much for watching. Hopefully this guide gave you the best support character in Baldur's Gate 3. It certainly is one of my best creations and has not died yet, and my team has not yet failed a battle, even if it got a little hairy from time to time. Thank you so much. Have a good night. Take care. And I'll see you guys next time. I'm out.